The biggest deal keeping agency owners from really making what they're deserving is that you need to have some fancy legal agreement that's really complex and difficult. I've done all my agreements for the last 16 plus years with a simple one-page agreement, and that's what I hope to show you and convince you is the right thing for you to do. So in this video today, I'm going to show you how to structure these deals so it fits on a single sheet and covers you in every way necessary to make sure you're not taken advantage of and that you give both parties exactly what they should have. I'm Fred Gleek, and I've been doing equity deals for the last 16 plus years. That's my primary and now my only method of doing business. I strictly do equity deals and nothing else. I used to be doing, similar to most of you, I'll bet, doing fee for services, a retainer, a monthly agreement, something like that. I've cut all that out in favor of this, an equity-based business that I suggest that you at least start implementing. Okay, so here are all the things you don't want to put in your agreement. If you make an agreement super complex and difficult to understand and read, it's going to kill the agreement. You won't be able to convince anyone to sign it. Lawyers, because they're getting paid by the hour, love to make these kinds of agreements super complex. So lawyers, I'm going to put them there, and then I'm going to put X, none of them. Legal agreements like these scare away potential partners. So the goal here is not to make the most bulletproof legal agreement, but to make one that gives both parties what they need and get them to sign it. That's your goal. The first thing you have to do and put on the agreement is your percentages. You also have to emphasize clarity over legal mumbo jumbo jargon. In this agreement, it's also critical that you put in the roles and the responsibilities of each party. Everybody knows what they should be doing. You should also define expectations of each party. Do not micromanage. You also want to make sure and outline and detail performance metrics. What are you measuring? Every agreement must have an exit clause. That's for sure, because without that, what happens when someone decides to take off or to leave? Make sure and have something that details what happens if either party decides to take off and move on. One of the things that I like to include in my exit clause, it states who should get how much, and specifically, it details what will be left to your heirs or the people when you either leave the earth or you leave the agreement. Okay, so now let's talk about how to present the agreement once you have it together confidently in a manner that will ensure that you get it signed if you are in fact the right pair to do this with. First thing is never and don't apologize. What's the reason for apologizing? You have an agreement that needs to be signed because this has obviously got factors that have to be put in writing so that both parties know who does what, and all of the other elements that we've discussed. So never act like you shouldn't be doing this. Put it to them very straightforward, and don't be ashamed. Frame the agreement as a benefit, because in fact it is. How many times have you had arguments with people after the fact in which you heard something one way? And I can think of this very specifically, an example of mine, where I remember distinctly talking to someone that I entered into an agreement with about a domain name. That domain name was a really premium domain, and I remember distinctly telling that person that I would continue to own the domain name no matter what. He, on the other hand, heard it completely the other way, that he would own the domain name. So what ended up happening is I eventually gave in and gave him the domain, but that was not what I intended to happen. That's not what I said would happen. But because I didn't have it in writing, that's what did happen. Okay, so thus far, all I've kind of stressed with you is the idea of trying to find a way using your one-page agreement to completely avoid or get away from any lawyers. There are times in which you may and do need legal help, and I just want to go over a few of those with you. Deals involving significant assets that someone may already have. So, assets, those would be things in which someone might presume that you own the building, but now maybe that the other party thinks that you now jointly own the building that you're in. They thought that that was going to be part of this deal. You may have a significant amount of other intellectual property that's very valuable that, again, your new partner has thought or will think that this is part of this agreement. And you've got to make it very clear it's not or it is. That's your determination. But this is an example in which you have a significant amount of stake in what you already or they already own. And so it should be clearly detailed and determined. And that's where you might need a lawyer. In some of your cases, you may be looking at regulatory issues that are very complex. For example, I always think of the environmental issues. If you're doing something in which you could be violating or have to go very strictly by the rules of the EPA or something like that. So you want to make sure that if there are any regulatory issues that you go to a lawyer, because those need to be specifically outlined in an agreement so that you don't end up with what could be real huge liability. International partnerships, and good luck with those, because oftentimes those are the most tenuous, because a deal that's done here in the United States, we're obviously going to follow laws here in the US. That might be state by state, by the way. Whereas when you go overseas, the question is, which is the presiding legal body? Are you going to be listening, or even if you were to say that all problems and issues should be adjudicated here in the United States, that may or may not be the case, depending on where exactly business is taking place. So obviously anything having to do with international needs a lawyer. In the event that you have a public and publicly traded company, that's an example of where you must make sure you get legal help, because they're complex intricacies that only they may know about, and you, by not having a lawyer, may end up in some deep legal hot water. And by the way, most standard equity deals that you and I will probably get involved with will not need a lawyer, but I just wanted to make you aware of the ones that might, so that you're not blindsided if you do any of these deals, that you should and must have a lawyer. The reason why I have the right to talk about these agreements is I've done a lot of them, but I want to just give you a few to give you some examples. Now, in the case of my longest term and the person who I started this all with, Bill DeWeese, who's in the voiceover field, he and I put together an agreement, which was a simple kind of 50-50 split after expenses. But in that agreement, and this is important, I made sure that since I was giving my time and knowledge and expertise, that he put up his money. So when we first got started, we put this together and the agreement just said, look, we're going to split everything 50-50 after expenses. But when we first got started, we actually paid for, and this is back in the days when we needed somebody that was doing SEO. So what ended up happening is we paid a guy $15,000. That $15,000 went into kind of a holding pattern. And it was there because any of the revenue that was generated from this venture that I did with him, he had to get paid back this initial $15,000 first before we did the 50-50 split. Now, the reason why we decided, or I decided and felt it was important to put a 50-50 split together, is because this was starting from scratch. In some of your cases, that may not be the case. So I'm not saying 50-50 is always the way to go, but if you're starting something from scratch, it's probably the way to go, assuming that you have equal skills on both sides of the equation. Here's another thing that happened with that particular agreement that's worth noting and worth reminding and bringing to your attention, which is when we first put this deal together, what we said was that we would split everything 50-50 except, well, actually, we said we'd do everything 50-50. Now, here's what happened. Bill did some one-on-one work with some people, some clients, and then came to me and said, you know what? I don't really feel this is fair. That I should be giving you 50% of something where it's all my time and none of yours, and you're just watching and collecting money. That's not fair. And I said, you know what? You're 100% right. So we amended, and you can do this, we amended the original agreement to say that we would do a 50-50 split on anything that involved less than 5 people being trained on voiceover work or doing voiceover services at one time. So that means, 4 or less, there was a split that we agreed to that was he would get 80% and I would get 20%. So when he did someone's demo for them, working one-on-one, and he charged them, let's say, make it easy, he's charged them $3,000, he would get 2,400, 80% of 3,000, and I would get 600, the balance. Because I agreed with him that it wouldn't be fair, and I wanted to continue the agreement with him, and I wanted him to feel good about things, but it made sense that if he worked with 4 people or less, that the split would be 80-20, and if it was 5 or more, it would be 50-50. So we changed the agreement to include this new element. Okay, so you've been listening to all of this, and you're wondering, well, I need something to go on. I need a guide. And yes, you do. So if you comment the word equity here below, I will send you my 1-page agreement cheat sheet. This will give you a lot of what we talked about here, but then you can just do a find and replace or fill in the blanks so that you can have an agreement. And again, this would be one of those agreements that does not need a lawyer. If it needs a lawyer, you can take this agreement that you're going to download and fill in the blanks for to a lawyer, and then you can have them look at it, make changes to it, etc. But you can start with this, and you start with this by downloading it below. So now the question is, what if you need help? What if you like all of these ideas about doing equity deals, but you're really not sure exactly what to do and how to do it, and you want my help? So I have this thing called the 90-day accelerator. It's where I work with you, obviously, for 90 days until you get your first equity deal. I'll even get on sales calls with you if you want me to. I'll work with you for 90 days. And if I can't find you an equity deal in 90 days, I will extend that for another 90 days up to a full year or 365 days, because I'm so confident that these ideas that I'm sharing with you, we can find you a deal in which you can make this happen. So I'll work with you one-on-one to make that happen for 90 days. And if we can't get it in 90 days, I'll do it and work with you for up to a year to make it happen. So don't let legal fears stop you from doing equity deals like this. Go ahead and download the 1-page agreement so you can get this going immediately and not sit there and continue to work only for flat fees and only for hourly rates. You deserve much more than that.